Well, hello, Megan. Welcome to Meet the Olympic Press. And I am putting you in this segment because you are one of the most prolific athletes on Twitter that I feel like you've become one of us in the figure skating blogging sphere. So I wanted to get your take on what is happening with the verdict of the Kamila Valieva doping case, Skate Canada's appeal, Terry's statement, so on and so forth. What is your reaction to everything?
Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? 2 years ago, and then again 2 nights ago, I predicted that this was exactly what they were going to do. Um, 2 nights ago, I told Bruno that tomorrow morning the ISU is going to announce that Russia moves down to bronze. Valieva's points will be gone, but they won't have replaced them with the other skaters. Like, I feel like I foresaw this madness that makes no sense. And when I told Bruno, he was like, no, that's outright ridiculous. They can't do that. And I was like, well, they will, you'll see. And I didn't want to believe it and believe my gut, but it's wrong. You can't pick and choose when to follow a rule book.
Mhm.
Like, you follow the rule book for Europeans and you bumped up every result after removing somebody, but then at the Olympics you don't. No, you follow the rule book all the time. End of story.
Yeah, I was asked by Maya why they did that. And the only thing that I can think of, because it doesn't make any logical sense, right? If you read the rules specify what they would do. Do you think it's because Canada and Japan haven't fought hard enough in this? I mean, it was kind of a singular fight that just the Team USA athletes, Vincent Joe primarily, was really strong in his
I
statements,
think
obviously.
it was too for a while.
Yeah.
I've been pretty vocal. Um, I think, like, yes, I agree with you, but I think a couple of reasons. I think number one, the US was the loudest
Hmm.
because they were the ones that were going to get the gold.
Hmm.
But I mean, I did ask Skate Canada in 2014 after the whole systematic doping was brought up if they would fight for our team gold from Sochi, and they told me no. Um, but I think America was louder because the gold was on the line. It's a little bit different. And every time I complained, particularly to my husband, about like why Japan and Canada don't seem to be doing anything, he was always like, "What? How do you know that they're not doing anything? Maybe they're working behind the scenes. Maybe they were. Maybe. Do I believe it was loud enough? I can't
Yeah.
speak for Japan because I don't speak Japanese and I don't follow the Japanese media and the Japanese press. So I cannot speak for Japan. But for Canada, yesterday they sent out a really strong statement, but it's the first thing they said about it in 2 years. I think that in hindsight, they could have been fighting for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think, there's obviously strength in numbers, right? So I was listening to Maggie Nichols' book last night, and she was talking about the army they had together in the Nasser case. And I
Yeah.
think for clean sport to be a priority for athletes, athletes need to band together. But I do think that there's a lot of silencing that happens to athletes by federations. I mean, you said Evan Bates was strong in the beginning, right? But he's competing in ice dance, so maybe he can't say much now, right?
But
Maybe
like
they.
this morning, the US team, like so many of them were on the Today Show.
Mhm.
Where has any of Canada's 2022 team been?
I don't remember
Yesterday,
who was
I was on
on their team.
CTV National News and I was told that they couldn't get the athletes from Skate Canada. Why? Why did I do all the news last night? I did CBC, CTV, CBC radio. Why was it not the skaters that had competed? Why was it me?
Because you're the only one who's going to give an opinion and they like you and hate you for it.
Well, Skate Canada hates me for it. Yes.
Well, talk
But
about what you're doing right now. Talk about like the silencing of athletes. You are volunteering at an event. Can you tell this story? This is
oh my,
hilarious.
it is hilarious. So we're holding a pre-novice and novice national event at our ring, and so I offered to volunteer. Like, I'm thinking like help with the skaters lounge, be an ice captain and open the door for the skaters, being directly involved with these young pre-novice skaters, inspiring the next generation. And then I get an email a couple of weeks ago being like, you've been put on transportation. Like, I swallowed my pride. My mom was like, no way you're doing that. That's ridiculous. And I was like, well, like, I offered to help. So I emailed the Skate Canada committee that runs these events. And I said, I really hate doing this. I hate to like toot my own horn. But I was like, as an Olympic and a world champion, don't you think I'd be better utilized in the rink with the young skaters, doing something directly, like helping them? And they said, no, we're going to use you for transportation. So I just spent my day picking people up at the airport and officials, not skaters, officials, up at the airport and driving them where they needed to go. And
Yeah,
it was
but
wonderful.
imagine the
I
people
don't
you
think
could
it's
be
what I should
talking
be
to.
doing. It's not what I should be doing.
Yeah, but think about what you could be doing with the officials in this car. That could be Skate Canada's worst nightmare if you're just going to be having all this time in traffic. I mean, I remember you driving in Montreal. We talked about.
Some of them told me and thanked me for what I do with my voice in this sport.
Mm-hmm.
So that was nice. That was nice to hear.
It is interesting because there are a lot of times that officials will thank you privately, but not publicly.
Off the record.
Yeah, and it's nice and it's hard at the same time when you are the person out there that you, right?
I don't understand what's so hard when you're fighting for something that's like so clear. Like, it's not like this is controversial. This is the rules. Rules are rules. Why are people scared to stand up for what the rules are? I'm very.
What is Eric's position, right? And I don't mean this to criticize him because there are different realities, right? But he was a member of that team that now will win the bronze medal, but he's also an ISU representative. People say, well,
he's the voice for the athletes. He's the advocate for the athletes.
So, in my opinion, though he does have a vested interest, this would be a time to stand up for clean sport within the ISU?
I believe, yes. I believe that this is exactly what this position should be used for.
I mean, if not this, then what, right? And I think that there are so many people that are afraid to speak, even within the ISU. That's what it always appears, right? That's what you always hear when you talk to people. But I do think that Eric could be rather strong right now in terms of his position.
Eric does have strong opinions. And he would have strong opinions similar to mine about this. I know that. But maybe there's some influence in the ISU that he doesn't feel comfortable talking about.
I think it's being injured later in your career, right? Imagine if he had some trimetazidine and some other supplements, how much easier the last 2 seasons of your career may have been together.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like, we would not have been 7th at that World Championships if we had the performance enhancing drugs. I wouldn't have the permanent bruise on my hip from throws if I had the performance enhancing drugs.
I love, though, like, Evgenia came out and she said, well, how did drugs help athletes anyway? Which is their favorite statement to make, which, of course, it's all about the training. It's not going to magically make you do a quad, but that is the favorite argument of people to make.
Yes. But you know what drugs will do? I could try 2 or 3 throw quads a day. That was my limit. If I had performance enhancing drugs, maybe I could try 20 a day, which would up my consistency, up my quality. And instead of taking me 6 weeks to learn it, maybe I could have learned it in 3.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that people don't realize, because it's a very good soundbite to say, well, how is a drug going to teach you a quad or to skate like that?
Yeah.
And while it's true that a drug cannot give you momentary brilliance, it does allow you to recover, which allows you to train more, right? Yeah. So it's all about the equation of recovery, lactic acid. Michael Phelps has a condition where he naturally has less lactic acid in his body, right? And that allows him to train more, and that was part of his success. So,
and you know what? Drugs can lower your stress level at competition also, which can help you compete better.
Yeah.
Drugs can help you lose weight, like, which shouldn't be an issue, but for some, you think that then you're going to rotate faster. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I also would like to see people band together. You know, there's been so much talk about the medals, right? But what about the entourage? We heard so much during the Olympics by Thomas Bach about Valieva's entourage. Well, now the verdict has come back. She has been disqualified, but what about that entourage? And, you know, when are people going to look into Shevetsky and Terry and the whole federation?
Like, what else does Shevetsky, or however you say his name, what else does he need to do? He's already been part of a doping scandal in rowing, left that into skating. Like, what else do you need? He's not even a sports medicine doctor that's working within sport. I think that I'm very interested because I heard some news that from that Finnish doctor that was part of the CAS trial that's said that there will be a report coming out in 1 month with intriguing information that hasn't been brought up yet. And I'm very curious what that's going to be. Is that going to be information about the entourage? Is that just information about more about the drugs testing and what came back from that. Like maybe that's going to put light on the coaches and the doctors. I'm not sure, but maybe.
Yeah. It's fascinating because if you go on drdoping.com, you can find all of the information about the drugs in Russian and in English. It's a thing. It's a website, drdoping.com. And under energy is trimetazidine, also meldonium. Remember, and Terry was on in that famous interview, said we can't use meldonium. We'll have to find something else.
Something else. Yes, exactly.
If you go on that website, you can find the calculation for the half-life of trimetazidine. And it is mathematical.
Is it a site that's just like open?
Yeah, you can buy the drug. If you wanted to dope right now, you could go to drdoping.com, buy it all, have it shipped to your house.
Oh my God, that would terrify me.
So there is, and it also has the drug information. And it tells us what they use the drugs for, which is so brilliant, right? drdoping.com. Find
that site for providing that information, at least.
Yeah, but and you could also find the Octavagan, which is what they're using in Germany. They have all the drugs that we hear about in sports are on this website that are always popping up, that it's always accidental, right? And what's so interesting is that it would have been mathematically impossible for anything with the grandfather if she had the trace amount, and you could find the amount, the trace amount was in the official CAS reports. So they actually have all of that information. And if anybody would actually do the mathematical calculations, it's like, she's lying, they're lying, and it's just maddening that these, arguments get thrown around, which they're meant to do in the public, right? It's meant, these talking points, to confuse everyone.
Well, I thought that like for a moment there when I saw the report that they were giving Russia bronze, I thought like, is this a deal that the ISU is doing with Russia? They're like Kamila took the heat. They're giving them the bronze, and then Russia is going to slip back into international skating. Mm-hmm. I thought like it was some deal that they struck, but then Russia announced that they were going to appeal this decision. So I was like, okay, that kind of like puts away my thought of it being a deal between the ISU and Russia. But like the audacity of the Russian Olympic Committee and the Russian Skating Federation, whatever one of them that said that they're going to appeal this. I mean, you're being given a medal you don't even deserve, and you still think it's wrong. Like,
well, Evgeny Plushenko awarded himself his own color medal. So this is not a surprise. As far anything that happens from now on, I believe the entire team should get platinum medals from Evgeny Plushenko, and he can give it all to. They can have the. Yeah.
Don't when you're banned from WADA, are you not banned from competing domestically?
It depends if they want to comply with WADA or not. She is not supposed to
keep competing. Like they're just openly saying that. So like they're openly admitting that they're not going to follow WADA's rules.
Yeah.
And then the rest are like attacking me, like, what rules? What rules do we have to follow? And I was like, literally the rules of international sport that the rest of the world follows.
Yes.
The rules are like, they're so above the rules in Russia, apparently.
Well, are you troubled that no one is asking the questions about Daniel Grossel, who's also with the Terry? I mean, at what point does the ISU have to take action against a Terry?
And is the like Italian Federation going to announce like what actually happened with that, or is this going to be thrown under the carpet? I have so much respect for Italian figure skating, so I'd like to hope that they are going to come like out with this big report that explains it. Maybe it's doing its due diligence. I don't know.
No, but we haven't heard anything. And they did cover this. Phil Hersh tweeted yesterday, the front of the Italian news. So they are covering Kamila and Terry, but are they going to cover Daniel?
Maybe now it's going to like be linked together.
Now is the time, right?
Do I know what extent?
Well, I would like to see their commentators from nationals fight just as hard. And then.
Yes.
I would like to see everyone in Canadian skating fight as hard for this, for clean sport, and for rightful winners and fair competitions. So thank you so much for your input as always.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Olympic Press. I'm Dave Leese, and I'm thrilled to welcome Phil Hersh and Christine Brennan.
Hey, Dave. Hello, Dave. Well, this is going to become a daily program if this.
Yes, I think so. Well, when I saw that the ISU didn't add the math correctly in their own rules, I thought, Well, this sounds like figure skating. I mean, can either of you make sense of it? Who wants to start?
I don't know
Phil,
if you can read it. Here's the math. Here's the math.
I'll start because this is what is typical of all of these international organizations is their rules are written in such a murky manner that you could make a case that they did interpret the rules correctly because it doesn't, what they don't have is spelled out, which they should have had an example, such as this one. Team 7's pair skater is disqualified. In that case, we give Team 7's points to Team 8 and move everybody up one. That's what it didn't have. I mean, that's common sense says that's what you would have done, but common sense and the International Skating Union would be very strange bedfellows.
Well, that Phil, 100% correct. And Phil and I have covered this. We should figure out how many years together, Phil. When did you start covering the Olympic world?
My first Olympics was 1980.
80. Okay, so we'll give that 44 years, right? And my first Olympics was 84. That's 40 years. So 84 years between us of covering this stuff. So
my math is pretty bad, Chris. So I'm glad you actually worked all this out because I would have come within maybe 5 or 12 decimal points of the correct answer.
The good news, skating fans, is that it was pretty logical, 44 and 40. But yes, and we can do math here. So if the ISU wants to call us, we can help. Here's the rule, Phil, you're referring to. Rule 353 4A. And this is what Skate Canada put on Twitter and other X, whatever, and other things. Competitors having finished the competition and who initially placed lower than the disqualified competitor will move up accordingly in their placement. So I think, Dave, you want us to get into the math. As I said, I did this the other day, but I did a new one here, and I don't know if it's backwards or whatever. But
oh, it works, yeah.
Oh, it does? Okay, so the old score, and folks, this is, I mean, you can find this anywhere. Wikipedia has it all, you know, the whole shebang. If you put team figure skating from 2022. Okay, the old score, Russia was 74, USA 65, Japan 63, Canada 53. That was the score when we left that night, February 7th, 2022. Fateful night. The new score, so again, Russia 74, 65 US, 63 Japan, 53 Canada. The new score is first place, of course, US was 65. That was they had the 65, but as I believe, you add 1 for moving up in the women's short program, 1 for moving up in the women's long program because Valieva is no longer there, so you move everybody up, and 65 plus 1 is 67. Japan, 63 plus 1 is 65. Canada, 53 plus 1 is 55. And then good old ROC, Russia, 74 minus 20 is 54. So 67, 65, 55 for Canada, and then 54 for Russia. And that's how Canada would win the bronze. So
the only thing they got right was subtracting the 20 from the original Russian score. That's the only thing they got right.
Right. But Phil, you have made, I think, a good point on this, I believe on Twitter, that what it says, and that's the point you made a moment ago with us, is that it doesn't say Olympic team competition.
Correct.
We know what team means previous to Olympic team events, and that is a ice dance or pairs. Or it could mean single skaters, ice dance pairs. They don't specifically say team competition. So that is potentially the loophole. But again, if you're going to subtract the 20, now she's history. She doesn't exist. Well, then that means you have to, in my humble opinion, move up everyone. And that's how Canada absolutely should be winning the bronze medal.
I mean, I agree. Again, common sense. And as you put it, if you're going to deal with the points one way for one team, you have to, you can't either. I mean, you could have had if you had spelled it out, you could have said, if a member of one of these teams is disqualified, we vacate the points for that team, or we do something we don't. But they didn't. They again, they never think far enough ahead. And I was trying to think of the example that was germane, and I couldn't do it. But there was another figure skating example. What's interesting as far as I can think of, is there is no analogous situation elsewhere in Olympic sport where a team event is scored on this way. Basketball team event, the winning team wins and moves on to the next round. Whatever. So it's a peculiar, not peculiar. It's an unusual situation, an unusual way of adding the whole thing up, and they should have come up with examples that would have accounted for this situation. I mean, what would you have had if two people were disqualified on one team and one on another team? So anyway, that to me, I mean, when I read the rule about 50 times and tried to say, do I have a clear reading of this? I mean, it clearly applies to to individual competition and individual meaning for pairs and dance quote unquote individual, because then you are just moving people up and there are no points involved. On the one hand, you're on the single side, you took Valieva out and moved everybody up. And on the other hand, you took Valieva out and didn't move anybody up. I mean, what's that all about?
Right. And they only had 2 years to figure it out, Phil. I mean, they obviously didn't have quite enough time to figure out what to do. It's, what you're getting at about the Olympic world is absolutely correct. Like, think about, we have covered over the years when one member of a men's or women's 4x100 relay team in track and field or 4x400 relay team, when one of them is found is disqualified, doping violation, whatever, well, that of course takes out the entire team because you've got a baton going around the track. And so therefore that person who now doesn't exist, well, the baton couldn't have run itself around the track. So that's easy.
You're right. I mean, the oddest example of that, of course, was the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games, where the United States team, which consisted of Jerome Young, Michael Johnson, Antonio Pettigrew, and a fourth person who I cannot remember. And Jerome Young should not have been allowed to be on the Olympic team. He had tested positive in 1999, and somehow or other USA Track and Field put him on the Olympic team. So when that was determined, they said, okay, you're disqualified, but since you didn't run in the final, we're going to let you keep the medal. And then Antonio Pettigrew, when he tested positive later on in the next 3 years, admitted that he had been taking drugs after the fact. He admitted after the fact that he'd been taking drugs at the time of the Sydney Olympics. So then and Michael Johnson said was so disgusted he was sending his medal back. So then they disqualified the whole team. The difference, of course, Chris, is that you're not deciding this who else wins anything by points.
Right. That was my point. You've got a baton literally physically going. You can't take one person out. And this actually allows, right, Phil and Dave, for this exact situation of subtracting, because it's actually a very easy way to reorder the medals. You can take her out and still have Russia actually finish and if you want to, you could also say, well, you should disqualify them anyway, just for that. But that's another conversation. So the math is easy if you do the math right. I'm going to say it. Canada should have won that Olympic bronze medal. I actually believe that talking to sources, I know, Phil, you are too, Dave, you are, I'm sure as well, that there is absolute shock out there. Like, wait a minute, what did the ISU do? Did they not do all of the math? I think there's a chance we'll hear from the ISU. I don't have any reporting on this. If I did, I'd be happy to, of course, divulge it here, or as we all do, put it on Twitter or put it in our stories. But I actually think there's a chance they're going to have to get this right and
I was in contact with someone from the IOC today, and I asked them, does the IOC think that the ISU screwed up its math? And the answer I got back was, what do you think? Not no, not definitely not anything. So I think the IOC is supposed to meet February 7th, as I understand it. I think there's a very good possibility this will be overturned. Again, if they can sit behind the amorphousness of the way that rule is written, the ambiguity with which it's written allows them to do almost anything they want. And common sense rarely applies in situations like this.
How about the fact that Benoit Lavoie is Canadian, is the first vice president of the ISU for figure skating, the highest ranking official in figure skating in the ISU, is Canadian. I mean, where is Skate Canada's position here? And did they perhaps think that would offer them more protection because they were not out there fighting
Well,
for their
don't get me talking about Benoit Lavoie, who should not actually be an official of any organization anymore after his dereliction of duty prior to the 2002 Pairs scandal in Salt Lake City, when he had heard reports of vote trading at Skate Canada and didn't act on them. So, maybe Ben, who knows? Skate Canada actually took what for it, given its namby-pamby attitude about its athlete who was accused of sexual assault, it actually made a very strong statement about this. For them, it's this is a don't rock the boat world. Everybody's used to the Russians rocking the boat, but the nice Canadians don't want to rock the boat.
Well, I think we need to get Benoit a calculator, because if Benoit could actually maybe just, the pen and paper, because he could have helped out with the math. I truly think they blew it. I think like that they all talked. I heard on Monday, that they were saying Russia would be third. I said, what? That's like a math mistake. What? And I think someone must have just done this and they just went with it. I mean, I think that otherwise you pull it back quickly. The fact that we've all been emailing them. I started at 5:22 Eastern time in the morning on Tuesday. And as we're doing this at 4:48 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, still have not got an email back. So if you're the ISU and you have an answer, you would have sent it to the journalists covering it, right? And they haven't done that at all. And Phil, you made a good point about about Canada and that they are out there now with this. But I've heard from some people, Dave, you have maybe too, or Phil, where I've been hearing from folks who have said that Skate Canada was basically absent. And think of what the U.S. figure skating did. They had the empty boxes, basically empty box campaign, right? And the no medal campaign. And when I say that in the best of ways. I'm not saying that they were defending their athletes 100% and showing just how awful this was. And they were out there with that for, I think, on the first anniversary, maybe even sooner. And they were doing TV on that. And they were really, right. They were really, really saying, look at this, look at how horrible this is. I certainly was writing and talking about it. Others, of course, Phil, you have been, we all have been. But U.S. figure skating itself did a wonderful public relations job of letting everyone know just how egregious and really reprehensible this was, that their athletes left Beijing without medals around their necks.
And a year later, and then almost 2 years later, and
right. But Skate Canada
we can discuss when they're going to get the medals later. But Canada, you're right.
I don't think Skate Canada did it, and I wonder. I mean, again, I wonder if Skate Canada had the masterful public relations campaign that U.S. figure skating did. I wonder if that would have awakened ISU to maybe do a little more math, or at least be aware or be on guard a little bit, like, hey, we got to make sure we get this right. Although you would think the ISU would do that. But as we know, the last amateurs left in the Olympic world are the people running them. And the last amateurs in the Olympics are the people running the Olympics. And this is a perfect example with the ISU, because I think they blew it big time, and we've caught them, and they can't even reply to emails. And that, again, with these athletes, their fate, their careers, their opportunity to have that medal ceremony hanging in the balance, it's really reprehensible.
Well, now let's take the cloak and dagger side here. Did the ISU throw Russia a sop? Do this on purpose, throw Russia a sop? They've been out of figure skating for 2 years. They are, you can say about them what you want. They are an important member of the world figure skating community, probably the most important member other than Japan. You could say U.S. TV rights, but U.S. TV rights might be high for the Olympics, but they're not high for figure skating anymore. So did they, knowing that there appears to be, sadly enough, no end in sight to this war of aggression in Ukraine? Who knows when they're going to get back? Did they say, well, the Russians, we've been pretty hard. They've been as hard as anybody on the Russians. They haven't gone to any of this. Well, if you can prove you haven't pledged to Putin, or if you can prove that you're a neutral person, you can compete. So I don't know. I mean, that's just a thought I want to throw out there. Is this their way of making nice to Russia?
Yeah, I think so. You have to look at the fact that so many people within skating have been saying that they thought Russia would be back for next season, at least in some capacity. Although with, the recent decisions of the way the Paris Olympics are going and what gymnastics did with Russia, and of course this verdict, that seems to be changing. But there is always the tactic you hear from people about not angering the Russians within the ISU with almost any decision. Yeah, Christine, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually, Phil, I think it's absolutely possible and entirely probable, frankly, that, you and I have covered this, as we've said, for so long. And Dave, I know you've cared and watched as a youngster growing up, reading books and all the things that you've done to be in the position that you're in. So I know you also have kept an eye on it for quite a while. But Phil and I have been we've been in the room, we've been in the hallway waiting for decisions. We've been at these events and watched the ridiculousness and the knuckleheads, and all that running around. And so, yeah, is it possible that they said, well, we can interpret this rule this way? It doesn't say anything about team figure skating, right? And so let's do it, and let's throw Russia a bone. In this case, we're going to throw Russia some bronze medals. It would be awful if it's true, but it would be entirely in keeping with the very political nature, as you said, Phil, of all Olympic sports, and especially Russia's role in figure skating. Yep. And
Russia's not happy about that bronze, and
they're not. They're not. They are certainly on. Again, as of now, they claim that they're going to file a complaint. Now, what that means, does that mean they can't go? This is not covered under the. You can contest the actual decision of CAS on procedural grounds, because this is something else. So they would have to file a completely different complaint, as with Canada, with CAS, presumably. And now we're looking at who knows how long that could possibly take, another 2 years, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, clearly, if I look back on it and say, because I'm inclined to think the worst of these people, I think maybe it was a bone or a sop that they threw to Russia. But if they were smart, they obviously knew that Russia wasn't going to tolerate, being downgraded to bronze. They may actually consider that an insult more than they would have if they'd been disqualified. So, yeah, it's the whole thing is crazy. And it shows, Sarah Hirschland said the other day very emphatically, we're not going to delay on giving out these medals, but I don't see how you can possibly give them out of it, and so they're going to do it all in individual ceremonies. So the U.S., there seems to be no doubt that the United States is going to get its medal, except that Russia is contesting that fact. So can you give that? Can they go ahead and give that medal in their own ceremony, wherever it might be? I saw Al Roker recommend it be on the Today Show Plaza, but
it's ridiculous.
Which NBC would love, obviously, but
right. Well, I don't want to defend the ISU here, and I don't think there's much danger of that. But the ISU is doing the third. I think we agree. I certainly will say, from my opinion, third place is wrong for Russia. They should be fourth based on the math, as we have already discussed. But the idea of moving Russia down and reordering this, well, that all you have to do is look at the Valieva decision. So the ISU is actually doing what CAS, which by the way was working on this from late September all the way till they made the announcement. It's not like CAS showed up last week and then, what should we do here? So the ISU is just doing what CAS has basically told them to do on that piece of it.
Right.
But yeah, Russia, of course, is going to appeal it to the Swiss Federal Tribunal, like a Supreme Court kind of thing. But it's mostly procedural and technical. And I've got to, covering it in Switzerland as I did, you've got to believe, I'm not saying they did, but you got to believe that CAS and everyone involved dotted every I and crossed every T. So of course, Russia is going to appeal it, but they may lose that appeal. So
I don't think this appeal pertains to the results, though. What they're going to appeal is the decision, the actual decision.
Yes. Oh, yes, but that's what I'm saying. It only is technical or procedural. It is not. I mean, I'm going to guess the CAS buttoned this up pretty well. And so once they go to the Swiss tribunal, that they're going to find that it's going to, what are they going to overturn?
Right.
Right. Then, to your point, I agree with you. I think we have potential of at least 2 more appeals. Canada, obviously, has already talked about it, and Russia vis-a-vis this medal situation. Yeah. But now the question is this, can the US go ahead and have a shotgun wedding? Can the US say, we're okay, whatever's going on over there, you guys, even though Russia will say they want the gold. But if they lose on the appeal of CAS, that's a little harder because, of course, now the CAS thing has been upheld by that Swiss court, if that's the case. But can the US somehow get their hands on all those medals and literally have something at the White House this spring, say, and just go ahead and do it? Or are they going to have to wait because of potential appeals? But as you said, Sarah Hirschland, you and I were both on that conference call yesterday, Phil, and Sarah Hirschland said, full steam ahead, we're going ahead with it. And you certainly got the impression they wanted to do it soon to get it done. You've got 3 of the 9 are in college, and Madison Hubble is about to give birth. So you've got a few that are obviously busy right now. But and then of course Madison Chalk has said, which I think the first time this was floated was by Travis Tigert in one of my stories, the Paris Olympics, and of course that. If it's just the US, fine. US and Japan, fine. But if it's Russia in 3rd place, you cannot have a medal ceremony at the Paris Olympics with Russia. You could with Canada, throw that into the mix, because of course Russia's banned from the Summer Olympics in Paris, except for those neutrals because of the Ukraine war. So then you can't have the entire Russian figure skating team in the 3rd place position there. So on and on it goes.
I'm back to where I've been for a while. It'll be given out at the 2026 Winter Olympics.
There you go.
Well, what about Terry Tuberidze? She made a statement on Instagram this morning. She didn't know anything. She hasn't been able to speak to the press, even though she's been giving interviews to the press. And people have brought up that Thomas Bach made it very clear that he felt that Valieva's entourage should be investigated and potentially disciplined. At the last Olympics, he had a press conference of that. Well, the verdict has come back that she is guilty. Is anyone from the IOC, WADA, or the ISU investigating Tuberidze?
Not as far as we know yet. And normally these investigations are done by domestic agencies, and you would certainly trust a Russian investigation of a Terry Tuberidze and the whole crew at the Crystal Rink. So no, I think the answer to that question is no. I think there should be some sort of independent organization. I mean, anti-doping theoretically is independent. When a doping control officer goes, they have got some foreigners who go into Russia to take tests, to take samples, excuse me. So yeah, it absolutely has to be done. I'm just going to say something to play devil's advocate. What we know about a Terry Tuberidze is almost all secondhand. Very few people have been in that rink to watch what she does. I mean, I know I've seen that original documentary that has been taken down off of YouTube, in which there was no question that you saw them weighing themselves, okay? Mm-hmm. But that part of it, was she an unduly harsh coach? Apparently. But was she that much harsher than a lot of other coaches? I'm not sure. I just want to.
The Japanese documentary where Medvedeva's banging her head against the boards and she's laughing as she looks on her cell phone. I mean, that is really.
I'm trying to remember which one it was, and it was
the Russian one that you're referring to, where they're weighing themselves. But the Japanese documentary is the one where it's called 1 in a Million, and it's about Medvedeva's quest for Olympic gold, and it shows her. Taking off her cast so that she can skate on the ice with a broken foot, and she's trying to get her jumps back, and she's slamming her head into the boards. I mean, it's really unlike anything that they would ever show on US TV about coaching and have,
But I mean, the amazing thing, part of that is that Terry so blind that she didn't see how that would make her look?
She's hosting a show about weight loss. It premieres on February 8th. So how does that make her look? Yeah.
And I'm just, as happens, I happen to be reading Gracie Gold's book. And a lot of it is the same issues, coaches demanding weight loss again, and being, harsh verbal criticism, not any physical, no hitting, punching, throwing you in the corner. I mean, am I inclined to believe that Terry went way, way above and beyond what is considered normal? Yes, I'm inclined to believe that. But do I know that 100% certain? No, I don't.
Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
No, I mean, so it's very easy to paint her as the wicked witch of the West, Northeast, and South. But I would love to have a little more insight, which, of course, the problem is that in Russia, if you're, for instance, Yulia Lipnitskaya, you're not going to speak out. If you're any of these other people who've left Terry, you're not going to really speak out because that Putin's government doesn't like people to speak out against it. So I understand that people are restricted in what they would say, but and if in you know if I mean she was quoted about the whole we have to look for something else after meldonium was put on the list. So clearly she was, if not absolutely breaking the rules, certainly putting one foot on one side of the line and keeping the other one on the other side of the line until she saw which way the wind was blowing. But you are right. The important thing is Bach said this opera, he criticized obviously the way that they reacted to Kamila when she came off the ice in the free skate. And had also said that the entourage this is a big push in anti-doping now, that particularly when you're talking about children. Entourages need to be investigated. I mean, in East Germany, did those kids know what the blue pills were, what the yellow pills were when they were 10 years old? Of course they didn't.
No, it's interesting, though. Completely agree, of course, on the entourage issue, without a doubt. Any of us who've written about sexual abuse or emotional abuse, mental abuse, everything, physical abuse of young people in the Olympic world or in any sport, we care about that, of course. The interesting part about this case is, of course, Kamila Valieva, her defense was that it was her grandfather's medicine, right? And that somehow she ingested it or it touched her skin or whatever the heck whatever it was. Okay, as long as it's grandpa's, then how do you blame Terry for the drug test? Now, I'm not saying that's true, but it complicates matters a little, doesn't it? Because what we're saying is that Terry gave it to her, right? I mean, what people out there are saying, or what the rumors are. And by the way, a point that is hugely important for those who watch and wonder what we do and how we do it. I'm a journalist. Phil's a journalist. And there is nothing that we care more about in our careers than getting it right, than making sure we've got it right, than spending time bending over backwards to make sure we've got it right, than talking to everybody else just to make sure we've got it right, and then checking with our editors and rereading it 15 times, and then hopefully, then publishing because we feel we got it right. The number of times I've double, triple, quadruple checked things, Phil, you and I together in press rooms, this is serious stuff. Because if we get something wrong, it is horrible. And I take this so seriously. The reason I'm doing it all these years, Phil's doing it all these years, is because of how serious we are about it. So we just can't go and run with something. I know, Dave, you're not saying we should, but when sometimes people say, well, why didn't you report that? Believe me, we might be working on it. It can take years. So, but going back to Terry, so that's journalism and, waving the flag for journalism and doing things the right way. It can be frustrating for people watching us and wondering when we're publishing or when we're going to be able to get something. And sometimes we get it and sometimes we never get it. But going back to Terry, if in fact, now, if we do get the entire report from Cass, then we'll be able, I believe, to understand what Kamila Valieva's defense was, what her excuse was, what she told them. Maybe she said Terry did it, but we know publicly that grandpa was, it was his medicine, or supposedly, knock on, whatever, quote unquote. So if that's the case, then it's a little bit hard to go after the entourage if it was grandpa. I'm not saying it was grandpa, but that's what we heard. And that's a story that we obviously, a quote and issue that we as journalists had to factor into the reporting. As of now, I hope we get that Cass report and can look at it and pour through those pages, 100 or so, 150, whatever it is, and get a chance to see exactly what Valieva said about who doped her, when they did it, and why they did it.
That's exactly why I made that point about Terry. And just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Terry breeds their coaches. I've heard all these things. I've seen, I haven't seen that Japanese documentary. And I'm trying to think of the one young woman who did leave her about 2 or 3 years ago, alluded to, they always say she's a very demanding coach. Okay. So again, you can't, if you don't know it's right, you can't say it. That's what it basically boils down to. So, even with a Terry who you'd like to, convict and toss in with leg irons, just because it seems like you're on the right track. You can't do that. You can't do it. You can't put her in journalistic leg irons or real leg irons.
Well, I would make 2 points. One is that if you read the actual Russian news, the athletes give these quotes constantly in these interviews, and you wonder if they know what they're saying, but they're constantly talking about hormones, about hormone treatment after they quit skating, that they have to go to the doctors for, some sort of hormone treatment. They talk about visiting the same doctor in Germany. They talk about specific weights that they have to be at. When we had Slava Zagrudniak on to recap the men's event, he talked about being at the 2018 Olympics in a hotel room with Sergei Dudikov, and that he was, on the internet with Moscow to track the weight of the novice skaters at the rink at Sambo 70 in Hrustalny, and you wonder, why is he, tracking weight? As if Gracie Gold is telling us every coach in a rink could call someone fat. They don't need someone at the Olympics to be monitoring their weight. So I think there's a lot of very suspicious material there. But why hasn't CAS released their report? Because this would be a much more interesting and much more definitive argument to be making about why the ISU did what it did if they released the information, and they've certainly had a lot of time.
Oh,
So
this is typical though. This reasoned decision sometimes takes a week, sometimes takes a month. And that's been the case in almost every CAS decision. So I wouldn't draw any conclusions from the fact that we don't have it immediately. I noticed that Alan Abrahamson wrote that it's possible that under her status as a protected person, they might not release the report. So who knows? It certainly would answer a lot of the questions that the whole, do we know for sure? I mean, the law, what the attorneys said, and one of our attorneys said in Beijing, the stuff about the father's medicine. Do we know if that's what she actually argued? And was it now I've heard that it was in a cake. I've heard that it was in pudding. I've heard that it was in, that it was, that the shared glasses. They both drank out of the same glass. I mean, but we don't know what they actually argued before CAS. And again, we've all heard some spectacular explanations for doping. One of the things, of course, that Terry said today was that all of my athletes have never failed a drug test before this. And hello, Marion Jones and Lance Armstrong. So that argument is utterly specious.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Phil.
That's all I have to say about that.
Well, and I think one point, and it's been discussed a lot, but we know that she took the test on Christmas Day, December 25th of 2021. And of course, it was revealed, as we understand it, February 7th, 2022 at the Olympics. I was able to report it on February 8th. But the bottom line is we're talking about 6 weeks there. And I'd like to compare and contrast because, you got COVID. The Russian lab is banned, as I understand it. So they have to send everything, I believe, to Sweden. You would have thought they would have flagged it and said, we need these results before the Olympics. But whatever happened, you've got 6 weeks and Russia ends up sending someone who has a positive doping test to the Olympics. And this someone, by the way, is the Olympics. Peggy Fleming is literally going to be the star of the figure skating and of potentially of the entire Olympic Games. And of course, the whole thing blows up. So let's just compare and contrast. Sha'Carri Richardson from the United States tests positive, as I think everyone remembers, for marijuana. U.S. Anti-Doping Agency gets that result. And as sad as everyone was, I saw quotes even from USADA, because, of course, marijuana is a banned substance. And I think many people feel, of course, that's ridiculous. Them's the rules. And USADA announces it, has the result, announces it, and takes a potential multi-medal winning athlete out of the Olympic Games. That's what anti-doping agencies should do. That's the diligence when you're doing it right. And it's not just the US, by the way. Obviously, I'm an American, but I'm sure we can come up with lots of them from other countries that do it right. And here's Russia. Oh, gosh, shock of all shocks. 6 weeks later, oh, yeah, she tested positive. All right. Yes, there was a delay, but that's on Russia. And that's on how on earth does Russia even send someone with a positive doping test to the Olympics? And you can compare and contrast with something that the US did with marijuana in the case of Richardson with the Tokyo Olympics. There is an example of how it should be done.
Back in the day when it was the Soviet Union, you'd never see an East German athlete get caught for doping at the Olympics because they had an injury. All when they pre-tested that so frequently before they got on the plane or wherever it was to go to the Olympics that there'd be no chance that they would test positive. That's another part of the story. I would love to find out why, in fact, certainly the Swedish lab was understaffed. Certainly it was Christmas. So I'll give them a week to two leeway, right? But we're talking about 6 weeks. What I wonder also was Russia giving the finger to the world and saying, we know that this young woman is positive, we're just going to send her anyway. Or you could argue the other side. Again, she could have been quote unquote sick or injured, and all they had to replace her was the gold and silver medalists.
Right.
So, I mean, you could have won that, and you could have, you could have called the Empress back in St. Petersburg and got her to come on. I mean, they had six figure skaters at least who could have won those two programs. So.
Did they think she'd get away with it because she was 15 and a protected person? And they thought, oh, well, we know she's positive. We're asking, we don't know. It's a question, of course. Oh, we know she's positive, but guess what? She's 15, so she'll get away with it, which she originally did with that first cast ruling in Beijing. So yeah, there's a lot of questions, clearly.
Another question about the entourage, because Dr. Shevetsky is not actually an employee of the Federation. The doctors that work with the athletes are hired by the FMBA, which is the Federal Biomedical Agency, which also oversees the Russian army. So that is a part of their planning. And in terms of the research that is conducted out on drugs, which they are constantly publishing research studies about drugs that are banned by WADA, which is just really fascinating if you go on the FMBA website. So I am wondering if it finds out that the doctor who gave her the drugs is much higher up than a Terry, that is part of an apparatus that is much closer to Putin. Would that be a reason that the IOC didn't go after and investigate the entourage?
Well, yeah, that's fascinating, but totally unsubstantiated speculation. Do I think anything is possible? Yes, I do. I mean, after we saw what happened in Sochi in 2014, it's clear that anything is possible. But that's totally unsubstantiated.
Well, it lists on the FMBA website who the doctors are, so who their employees are, and that you can actually see the research that they're conducting, and it's really eye-opening. So I welcome anyone to do that, and I'll put the link below. But I would.
One thing that, sorry, Dave, didn't mean to.
No, you could.
One thing that people, before everything blew up with the math problem that is the ISU, and their simple math, there were conversations, of course, that Valieva's ban, as it is, of course, as Cass ruled, was December 25th of 2021 to December 25th of 2025. And then people are saying, oh, well, that means she can compete in the 2026 Olympics. And I'd love for us to talk about that for a minute, because first of all, you're banned and you're out for all those years. All of a sudden, you're not 15 anymore. You're 19. How many little kids are coming up that are also great in Russia? If first of all, if Russia's even allowed in the Olympics 2 years from now because of the Ukraine, atrocities and the war that they started and is raging on. Of course, we'll see where that is. Hopefully, it would be wonderful if it's over, but who knows? So even if Russia's allowed in the Olympics, but then 19 years old. But also the qualifying points and just the ability to skate and be ready, be in a position to make the Olympic team. I mean, like, who's talking about her competing in Milan, or people are, but really, is there any chance that she could possibly have enough qualifying, opportunities to
First of all,
be available?
I've said this on Twitter. I think the punishment, unless again, I haven't seen all of the documentation, but on the surface, I think the punishment was way too harsh. I think as a first offense, 2 years would have been more than enough, and I would have even settled for 3 months if they had stripped all the results. That to me was the most important part. So, there's no way that theoretically, and I was trying to get an answer to this question and didn't get it. If we go back to the Butch Reynolds case, this is going way back at the 1992 Olympic trials, you remember that there was the International Track Federation had a clause in its bylaws that if you ran in the same race as a banned athlete, you could be banned. Right. So theoretically, she cannot, presumably, I'm trying to find out whether that's part of the WADA code. I haven't found it yet. I've been looking through it. Theoretically, presumably she would, I guess, have to go to the Russian championships, but you don't know. I mean, they put people on who didn't go to the Russian championships. So she can't compete even domestically either for until December 21st or 20th, whenever it expires of 2025. I don't think there's a sure, Plushenko came back after a year off. So other people have come back after a year off. But 4 years, well, she's had competition now for 2 seasons, but 2 more seasons without competition, I don't think it's humanly possible. And if I were she, um, I'm not sure I'd want to do it. However, if things keep going the way they're going and quadruple jumps no longer seem a necessity in the operation, maybe she will. I mean, the programs that if you take out again, they're domestic scores and they shouldn't mean anything, but those scores were still pretty high. And I did watch her program at the Russian Championships, and it's a lot better than a lot of the other stuff you see out there. So maybe she could do a program with only triple jumps and still be a contender for a medal. And I think there would be some sympathy for her if she sits out for 4 years and comes back. That would show a lot of guts on her part.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I couldn't qualifying and all of that. But I mean, that whatever. I feel I certainly understand what you've put on Twitter about the harshness of the penalty. I will say this: it's a wake-up call for Russia. Russia gets away with a lot of stuff, including being in every Olympics when they should have not been in the Olympics after Sochi in 2014, 2016, 2018, 2021, 2022. And all of a sudden, you know what? They got the book thrown at them. Now, it is a 15-year-old young woman at the time. And yes, your heart goes out to her because presumably, unless it was the tainted, stuff on the kitchen table, that an adult was involved, and that's terrible. I would never say that's not the case. There's no joy in this. It's not like anyone's running through the streets. Obviously, the USA winning the Olympic gold medal is wonderful and so deserved for them. And they've been classy and dignified throughout the entire US team. Fabulous, wonderful people. But there's no joy with the Valieva, with what happened to her. But hello, Russia, you just got banned for 4 years.
Again,
that has meaning.
That's a very valid point. But why? First of all, they didn't throw the book at her; they threw the Oxford English Dictionary at her, or the entire, Britannica, if they still exist, Britannica Encyclopedia at her. I'm just saying, why? If that's what you're trying to say, enough is enough is enough. How many enoughs do you have before finally, fool me twice, fool me 108 times? Shame on me. Why put that burden on the shoulders of a 15-year-old kid? Why should again? But we don't know what's in that ruling. I mean, it's possible that there was a lot of prevarication going on, which would totally justify the maximum sentence. But people have gotten, a lot less for violations of drugs in the similar class in the past.
I think you have to look at some other facts too. I mean, how about the fact that Dr. Shevetsky is an anesthesiologist who has been involved in many doping scandals in the past? I mean, can you think of another federation, one, that would hire an anesthesiologist as their team doctor, and two, that would hire a doctor that got an entire rowing team disqualified?
He shouldn't. There's the problem. He should be. What else is enough to disqualify you? What he did was that certainly should be enough to disqualify you for life.
Mm-hmm. And if you considering that in the evidence, if they're going to consider who your experts are, I mean, I think that, there's a potential that judges even feel insulted by this at the Court of Arbitration. We don't know if they are, but if I'm reading that Russians are saying that she took it from her grandfather and that this doctor is an anesthesiologist, I'm going to say, yeah, give them 4 years. Russia doesn't take this seriously.
Again, I agree with that argument, but on the other hand, yeah, you don't. And on the other hand, it's just sad to me that this kid, who was then a kid, should have to bear the whole brunt of Russia's heinous actions for the last, at least, going back to past the London Olympics. So yeah, that's what bothers me. Clearly she had to be punished. Clearly the team had to be punished. Clearly the results needed to be stripped, which has all happened. But maximum ban, I mean, I get what you're saying, Chris. I get what you're saying, Dave. I mean, again, they've flaunted their lawlessness at us for a dozen years at least. And so now we're making them pay. Unfortunately, you're making them pay on the back of a 15-year-old.
I mean, we even saw Tamara Moskvina posing with Dr. Shevetsky, this summer when they were at the training camp. I mean, just the optics are so poor, it just doesn't make sense why they would
They
do that.
think they can get away with anything because they did until
They have, yeah, they have
they
gotten
did
away with
until
so much.
2014 in Sochi. They did. Anyway, I mean, but there's still so many. We had this startling ruling, and then the next day a startling decision about what they were going to do with the results. And there's got to be at least one more startling in here somewhere.
That's right. These things come in threes. We always say this only in figure skating. And again, while we laugh or joke about some of this, again, 15-year-old Kamila Valieva, that is a big issue. And of course, the weight that the U.S. had, these U.S. skaters, Japanese skaters, Canadian skaters, if in fact they're the bronze medalists, it's so unfair to not have the opportunity, that wonderful, singular, lovely moment where the sports world is, stops, and you're on that medal stand, top or second place, third place, and they put a medal around your neck and the flags go up and an anthem is played. And those athletes will never have that opportunity. They may be able to recreate it in Paris or at the White House or wherever, but it will never be the same. And that's what we should be remembering today and always. Those athletes from the United States, from Japan, from Canada, who did nothing wrong. And I know people say, well, there are some Russians on that team. Well, the Russian team, I think we've dealt with Russia. So I'll focus on the US, Japan, and Canada. And what a lovely, lovely turn of events this is for them, assuming the ISU gets its math right. But the ordeal that they've had as sports people, in the world of sports, it's just egregious. And they're celebrating today, but they'll never quite have that sense of wholeness about it. And that is a shame. And for that, we can blame the Russians.
Curiously, though, if I might just make this one point, because of the very special circumstances in Beijing, no spectators.
Yeah.
And now, because of all the attention this case has brought, if they can put together a three-country settlement ceremony, even at something like the World Figure Skating Championships, I will contend that it won't be the same because of the timing, but I'll contend it'll be more moving and get more attention than the medal ceremony in Beijing might have. So that's the one upside in a very, very downside situation. That is, and again, when Evan Bates was talking about this on Saturday, he wasn't talking about the unfairness of the decision or the procedure. He was talking about the unfairness of the wait. He said, I want to find out why we waited this long. That was utterly wrong. But in the end, let's hope that when these medals are presented, they are presented to the two North American countries and Japan, and they are presented in an environment full of fans. Maybe even the Boston World Championships of Russia isn't back in, and we know that it's going to attract a lot of attention from the U.S. media, the networks and whatever. So hopefully they will have a moment which will make up to a large degree for what they didn't get in an empty stadium or an empty medal plaza in Beijing.
True. And you can have the family there, where it's when we were there in Beijing, of course, yes, it was, you couldn't do anything. That is a great point. But I think it's almost like two conversations, right? Because when they left and didn't have that, it is the Olympics, and those ceremonies were nice in Beijing. You didn't have your family, but you were still at the site getting it right afterwards. I also think this, guys, I'm kind of surprised that this team, this has gotten a lot of attention the last couple of days. Phil, you and I have been working like crazy. Dave, we've all been talking about it and dealing with it. And it's gotten, GMA, we did it right at the top on Tuesday. The Today Show had 5 of the U.S. members of the team today, Wednesday. I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been some company out there that has decided, even maybe some kind of commercial or something about waiting or, deserving something, you don't get it, and maybe that will come, and make them, because I agree with you. I think that there is something singularly so different about this, that it's not about making money. Obviously, it's about the medal. But the thought that they are celebrities in that sense, and that really hasn't happened. That hasn't captured it's captured the attention of the nation, kinda, but not where I would have thought. Now, maybe going into the Winter Olympics in 2026, maybe they will, but I think they are celebrities in a different way. And I think you're right, Phil, that there is a way to turn this into such a big positive, which is why, like Paris, all of a sudden the Summer Olympics stop for a Winter Olympic medal ceremony. That's really cool, actually.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the French are going to want it to happen. And I'm forgetting about timelines and everything. I just don't think that's going to happen. I agree.
No, I agree, but I think there's an opportunity at the point where you and I are agreeing. The point is the opportunity to make it something really special and different in its own right.
The bigger the venue for it, the better it would be. And as you said, and we've all said it multiple times, the way that I haven't heard much from the Japanese team but no complaints. Then the way that the United States and Canada didn't really whine about this. They said they were frustrated was the strongest thing. They didn't say we got screwed. They didn't say we got this. They took the high road throughout this entire process. I think that'll make it even better when they do. I mean, people will feel for them even more because they didn't behave like spoiled children in a world with a lot bigger problems than whether you got an Olympic medal or not.
I'll never forget being in the mix zone. Phil, we missed you terribly in Beijing, although I know you didn't necessarily miss being there. But and looking at Evan and Maddie in particular, because they did not win a medal in ice dance, right? And there they are, the team captains for this team, and they're standing there. We're all masked up, and we're all 10 feet apart. And it was tough. I mean, they beautiful words, class, dignity, grace. That's what Maddie and Evan are all about, as all the other U.S. athletes are for sure on the team. But just looking at them at the end of long slog of 2 weeks, 16 days of an Olympics, and what they'd been through, and their shoulders kind of hunched, and they were still classy, and they were still saying the right things and about the disappointment, but we're hoping it gets resolved. And I'll never forget that visual of them and the thought that they are now Olympic gold medalists. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been years as they've worked for this. It's. I mean, there is going to be, after this long and frustrating wait with this bizarre turn about how the medals are going to be reallocated, it's going to wind up on a high. I'm virtually certain of that. And I'm looking at my clock, and I'm going to wind up on a low if I don't move on. So.
Yes, I understand. And I just wanted to, also give credit to Vincent Joe, who did speak out about this. He was in COVID quarantine during the Olympics. You certainly have to feel for him. I mean, just talk about a terrible Olympic experience all around for Vincent. And I think we have the next, you say big. Well, I think NBC Peacock, Tara Lipinski is a producer. And I think that this is certainly the next documentary for her to tackle after medaling. Well, thank you both so much, and I'm sure there'll be much more to talk about in the coming weeks. So thanks so much.
Startling 3, the sequel.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Dave.